So in the last video, we set up our PostgreSQL database, and we also created an environment variable to make accessing that database much easier. What I want to do in this lesson is to install our driver to be able to have Go interact with Postgres, and then to set up our database code. So let's go to the main.go file. And the first thing we need to do is to actually set up our DB field in our config struct. Okay, so currently we have the port and we have the environment. However, we also want to have a field which will contain all our database specific configuration. So instead of having individual fields, I'm just going to create a dbstruct. Okay, so I'm going to create a struct, and the dbstruct will have all the fields that belong to the database configuration. So the first field will be the DSN, and that is a string. Later on, we'll add more fields to this dbstruct. Okay, let's move on. Okay. So what we want to do is to be able to have the user, or for us to be able to pass the DSN, the data source name, via flags. So I'm going to create a new flag. By the way, we did the same thing in the first series, so this is just a recap of that. So we're just going to create a new flag, and it's going to be a string var. All right, and we will save that in cfg.db.dsn. Now the name of this flag will be db-dsn. Okay. Next, we need to provide a value, which is the default value. And so we're going to use the environment variable. And so to get the environment variable, we will use the os.getEnv. Okay, and again, we've seen this before. And the name of the environment variable will be apple tree underscore db underscore dsn. And finally, we need to provide the usage string. And so it will be PostgreSQL DSN. Right? So that's all we need for the flag. And notice that we have the OS flag, the OS package being added for us. All right, because we need to use that here. Okay, moving on. We need to actually create the connection pool. So similar to what we did in the last series, we will create the connection pool. Okay, and so we will create a function later on. Okay, similar to what we did before, and it's going to be called OpenDB. All right, and we're going to pass it our configuration CFG. Okay, and it will give us back a database connection. Okay, specifically a pointer to database connection. Okay, and let's just quickly check for errors. So if error not nil, then we will simply call logger, and then we will have a fatal which means our program will halt. Okay, great. So OpenDB is our function, and so we need to actually write that function. So let's come all the way down here. Okay. All right, so we use an equals assignment sign because we have previously used error over up here. Okay. All right, so this is the end of our main. Let's now proceed to create our OpenDB function. Okay. And before I forget, let me close the connection pool. So let's just defer db.close. Okay. All right. So if anything happens, we want to be able to free this database pool, connection pool. Again, we've done this previously, so this is nothing new. All right, so let's proceed with creating our OpenDB function. Again, it's similar to the one we created in the previous series. Okay, so OpenDB the function returns a pointer to a SQL.db connection pool. Okay, so OpenDB, all we need to pass to it is it accepts cfg config. All right. Okay. And then we need to actually cfg config. All right. So we're passing in our config cfg, which is of type config. Okay, and then what it will return the connection pool. All right, so SQL.db, and then it will also return an error. Okay. All right. So all we have to do now is to simply call SQL.open. All right, and we've done this before. And we're going to pass in the Postgres parameter or string. Okay. And then we need to provide the data source name, which is found in cfg dot db.dsn. All right. So once we have these things, then we can proceed to checking for any errors. Okay. So if error not equal to nil, then we know we had a problem with the creation of the connection pool. And so we'll return nil along with the error. All right. Now, assuming that there were no errors, then we can actually now deal with testing the connection pool. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a context, okay, with a 5-second timeout deadline. Okay, and so a context, in essence, allows our application to know about the environment that it's operating in. For example, what is the status of the um, connection that the client's connection, has it been closed? Is it still open? So we need to know the environment so that we can respond. And so in this case, we're using the context package to check to see if our testing of the database connection times out after 5 seconds. And if it times out, then we need to put a stop or halt the running of our program. Right? I'll talk more about context when we actually use them when we're executing our SQL queries. So usually we have a context called CTX. We're going to have a cancel function. And so I'm going to say context. Again, this is the package. Context dot with timeout. Okay, and we need to provide a parent context. So we're going to use context.background. And then we're going to set a time limit. So 5 times time dot second. Okay, so we're also going to defer this cancel function. Okay, all right. So if everything, if nothing, if this times out after 5 seconds, then we want to cancel the process. Now, if it works out, we still need to make sure that before we leave OpenDB, we cancel this pending cancel function. All right, so that's context in a nutshell. And so what we want to do now, and this is how we use the context, we will ping our DB. So I'm going to use, previously we used ping, but now we want to use ping context. Okay, so whenever you're using context, there's always a context version of the function. So we need to provide the ping context a context. All right, so it's telling me it verifies a connection to the database is still alive. Okay, so we're going to pass in the context. Okay, and if error not equal to nil, then we will simply return nil like we did previously along with the error message. Otherwise, it means that everything worked out and everything is up and running. It's usable, and so we'll return that database connection DB along with nil to signify that there are no errors. All right. All right, so that's how we create the OpenDB function. Again, it's similar to how we did it in the last series, with the exception that we are using a context, so we can actually specify how much time we should attempt to test this database connection pool before giving up. All right, so let's save this. All right, and let's test it out. So let's just make sure that our server starts up. And let's see if we have our flags. So dash help. Okay. So notice we have our flags. We have DBDSN, we have ENV, and we have port along with the messages. All right, so those work. So let's actually run or start the server. Okay, So unknown driver Postgres. All right, and so that allows me to do something which I did not do, and that is to actually um, install the PQ driver. So simple enough, let's just say go get, and then I'm going to say GitHub. Again, we did this previously in the previous series. This should have been the first thing I should have done. So github.com /lib/pq. This is the PostgreSQL Go driver, and we will be using version 1.10.2. Okay, let's just wait. All right, installed. Now it's telling me that all right, so not used. So let's come up here. All right, so all I have to do is specify that. All right, so underscore github.com /lib/pq. Okay, and so I'm gonna say go mod tidy. All right, and so we are okay. All right, so let's run our server again. So this time it works. Okay. All right. So again, you need to make sure you install the driver. Okay. All right. So let's test just to make sure that we can actually log into our database. Okay, so our server is up. Can we still log into our database? Let's see, PSQL, $, Apple tree, underscore DB, underscore DSN. Okay, all right, so we can still log in. And so everything seems to be working. So to summarize, we installed the PQ PostgreSQL Go driver. We created an environment, we created a flag that will allow us to specify our data source name. By default, we'll be using Apple tree, dbDSN. And then, of course, we created a function which allows us to ask for and get a database connection pool. And keep in mind, once we get that connection pool, we need to also be sure that we defer the closing of that pool in case we have problems so that we do not leak our resources. All right, so let me commit this. So set up database connection pool. Okay, we push that. Okay, I will see you in the next lesson where we configure our database connection pool sort of to fine tune the way our database should work. I'll see you in that next lesson.